Hello, COM4806ers. I really hope all of you are well, and I trust that you have heard the news this week that Assignment 1 has been extended until the 19th of June. If you have not heard, check your announcements, as I think that all of your honours modules would have made this announcement in the past week, because that new deadline and extension of Assignment 1 is for all the honours modules in communication science. Maybe wider, but I can't speak for other departments. Okay, today I am quickly sharing with you some of the questions and answers type of thing for assignment 1. It's not a lot, and I think that now that the assignment has been extended, you might even realize that you have more questions later. You are always free to email me or to post on my UNISA with a question that comes to you later or that I don't cover today. I've gotten a number of questions, and I've kind of grouped them into themes, things that from the questions it seemed like you guys want to hear about. So it's not strictly Q&A, but it's based on the questions you guys have been sending me. So most of the questions are about the requirements for the assignment, like the basic requirements, or about the technical details, and then also about the content criteria or the content requirements. So let's start with the basics. So a lot of you have been asking about the number of essays, the length, the structure, and so on. Here are the basics again. You will find them on page 19 and 20 of your TUT 101. You have to write 3 essays, a total of 3 essays. We give you 4 possible essays. Everyone has to write the one about decol, post-call, and indigenous paradigmatic positions. And then from the other 3, you have a choice of 2. So the other 3 are the positive and post-positivist, the interpretivist, and the transformative and critical. So in the end, you can have 3 type of combinations. You can either have post-call, decol, indigenous, together with positivist and post-positivist, together with interpretivist. Or you can have decol, post-call, indigenous, together with positivist and post-positivist, and transformative and critical. Or you can have decol, post-call, indigenous, together with interpretivist and transformative or critical paradigmatic position. So there are those 3 type of combinations that you can end up if you know that you have to write the decol one, and then choose 2 of the remaining 3. Then each essay has to be around something between 700 and 1,000 words. And if you go according to the required Arial 12-point font with 1.5 point line spacing, you will have something like 2 to 3 pages per essay. And if you put all of that together, it is something like between 7 and 10 pages if you also include an introduction and a conclusion in your content. But these 3 essays are like 3 questions in an assignment. It's all one assignment. Assignment 1. It has one unique number. Your assignment must also be presented as a unit. 1 cover page, 1 declaration, 1 table of contents, 1 introductory paragraph for the whole big assignment, 1 conclusion for the whole big assignment, 1 list of sources consulted. And then each essay will be subsections. In your bigger assignment. I have made like an example of a table of contents to show you what I mean. Then for the essays themselves, the layout and the headings and the structure is kind of up to you. If you prefer to organize your work by making your own subsections, you can do that. If you want a separate introduction and conclusion for each essay, you can do that as well. You have to have a general introduction and conclusion for the assignment. That is the requirement of how we do assignments. But within each essay, you can have your own little introduction and conclusion if you want to as subsections. If you prefer, you can write the whole essay of between 2 and 3 pages without any subheadings, but just making use of paragraphs. So you can kind of do with the essay a bit more freely. I have made some examples of how you can maybe structure your essays. Personally, I prefer a more structured approach like this, where you are making use of subheadings. The problem or the caution that comes with this type of approach is that you cannot hide behind this structure. The content must be there, the arguments must be there, the volume of work must be there. You cannot create a very neat subsection structure with no good content under each of the headings. You can't get away with it looking like there's content because there's subheadings, but then there's no real content. Then if you use a more loose approach, like you only have this one overarching section heading for each essay, then your table of contents will look something like this, like a very simple table of contents. The caution with this type of approach is that you must remember that presenting your assignment is a little bit like a sales job. The way you say things, the way you approach it, must be sold in a way to that person that's reading and marking your work. If your marker feels a little bit confused and not sure where the details are in your content, you might end up losing marks because of that confusion. You are the writer, and you must ensure that your reader is always with you, with your argument. Even if you have this looser structure, use paragraphs, make separate arguments, make it clear that each paragraph is a separate section or argument or something. Make it easy for your reader to find where the specific criteria is that is necessary for each essay. Specifically about Turnitin, I spoke a little bit about Turnitin in the welcome video, and I trust that by now, even those of you who have been students with the previous system know that you have to submit your entire assignment, everything, to Turnitin, and then download your PDF Turnitin report, and that downloaded PDF Turnitin report becomes your assignment. It is your assignment. You can see the Turnitin requirements on page 4 and 7 in your TUT 101. Also on page 16 to 18, there's more details, also in your 101. Then under additional resources, as part of the documents that go together with the TUTLET 301, you will find a document called Student Information on Using Turnitin. This gives you a lot of detail on the process. There are two important things here. The Turnitin report is your assignment, but submitting to Turnitin does not mean that you have submitted to UNISA. You submit to Turnitin, download your correct report, and then submit via My UNISA. Then you have to download the PDF of your Turnitin report. The Tutorial 101 has some screenshots that will show you what this looks like, how this download process looks like. Make sure that your originality markup is visible, not the quick marks or the E-rater, or in older versions there are some things called grade mark and peer mark. The originality markup. Let me show you on the screen what that looks like. Like if you submit your assignment and you look at the report, it can look something like what you have on the screen now. Then you see this paragraph on your a column on your right hand side. If you press that, if you click on that top button, it will kind of pop out. The active layers here is you want similarity, so you see that is highlighted. Another way you can do this you can highlight that by clicking on it. Do you see the originality markup? This is the highlight, so we call that the originality markup. That must be visible. So that shouldn't be turned off, then you can't see the markup in the text. It also shouldn't have other of these, like this one is the grammar tools, the E-rater. If you click that, do you see the proofreading tools? It will be in your text like that, telling you some things about your grammar. That's very useful actually if you want to check your language. But when you hand in, that's not the markup we want to see. That should not be selected. That one should be selected. The similarity, originality markup. So if you look at the layers again, the similarity must be your active layer, not the E-rater. And you shouldn't have the E-rater and the similarity, then it becomes difficult to read and your marker might think that you have more similarity in there than you actually have. E-rater turned off, only similarity turned on. This is your correct Turnitin. Then you go to download and download the current view. Alright, so that is, make sure that you have the originality markup, but no other markups. Presentation. If you don't have the correct Turnitin with the correct markup, you will receive 0 for your assignment. So make sure it's correct. Do it long before the time, so that you have time to study your report, make corrections, figure out whether you have the correct one downloaded, and so on. And please don't try to fake it. I take a number of cases every year to student disciplinary. If I catch you trying to tamper with the Turnitin, I will report you. Remember that I can see every setting and every submission that you have made when I log on to the website. I can see your profile and see what you've done there. So if I see something, or if a marker that works with me on this module suspects something, I will open your profile and check what's going on there, check your settings and so on. Don't take a chance on this. It is also usually a lot less trouble to just actually do your own writing than to go to all the trouble to try some funny thing to fake the Turnitin or manipulate the report in some way. Just don't go there. Rather talk to me if there's something that you feel is insurmountable in terms of Turnitin, because it's not that hard to just do the right thing here. As I've said in the welcome video in March, we don't penalize on the similarity index itself, that percentage that you get for the similarity. We look at it. For instance, when I mark, I look at that similarity index before I look at anything else. I scroll down to the bottom of your assignment, I look at that markup. It gives me a good idea of what's going on inside of the assignment. I don't look at it and go, okay, 25% similarity, so that's a 10% penalty. No, I look at it and go, oh, 25% similarity, that looks a little bit too much. Let me see what's going on in the content. But now I know that I'm looking for a possible problem with some similarity before I start reading your assignment. Then in the content, I will look at the highlighted bits, that similarity markup. Every highlight shows similarity to other texts. I look at it. And if you look at enough of those, you get a pretty good idea of what it is you're looking at. I can see if you indicated the direct quotes correctly, even if there's a highlight. Or maybe you did indicate a direct quote, but it's only in single quotation marks and it wasn't excluded by Turnitin. That's a technical error, but it's not similarity. It's not plagiarism if you did the quotes correctly. Then, when I see you took words and a source reference from somebody else, that is the way I see that. For instance, if I see the text together with the source reference all highlighted, or bits of it highlighted, some of it including the source reference in text, then you probably did not copy from that source. You probably copied from somebody else who cited that source, because your work is similar to someone who actually referenced that source. So another thing is, if there's like a similar color highlight, like the same source dotted throughout your text, that's usually an indication, throughout your whole thing, that's usually an indication that you took someone else's assignment of a past year or of this year or whatever and based your work on that. So there are more examples like this, but you get a feeling when you look at a similarity report, when you look at the highlights in an assignment text, what it is that you see. And based on what I see there, you will be penalized. Usually, we penalize 10% for unacceptable similarity in smaller instances, 25% for more serious similarity, and for pretty serious cases, you will get a 0 based on your marker's interpretation of how serious it is. It's also possible that your marker feels it's a better idea to rather not mark those sections that contain a lot of similarity, instead of penalizing for the similarity on the overall marking. So, for instance, if your marker feels that you have too much similarity in the section about the assumptions of the decol paradigmatic position, then your marker might decide not to award marks for that section at all, instead of of deducting overall marks. So you might get a 0 for a section where you actually had information with a lot of similarity, instead of a minus something on the total. Because essentially what that similarity, if there's a lot of similarity in one section, what that means is that essentially there's too little of that section that you have actually written yourself. So we cannot mark it as if it was written by you. And then when you hear my way of reasoning, how we look at these Turnitin things, if you submit to Turnitin well in advance of the assignment deadline, you have enough time to sort out problems that show up in your Turnitin report. If you have enough time on hand, you can even talk to me about your report once you have seen it, in order to understand what you've done wrong and where you can correct it. Then, if you have any technical issues with Turnitin, I trust most of you would have sorted out your technical issues by now, but if you have, please email turnitin@unisa.ac.za. For the dedicated Turnitin person. Then other technical requirements. There's a standard order or structure for assignments. On page 15 of your 101, you will find the structure, but it's also in a lot of other places like checklists and so on, and on the requirements set out for each assignment separately and so on. The first page is your cover page, with your name, your student number, your module code, the number of the assignment, the unique number of the assignment, and the assignment theme. On the second page is a declaration of own work. Here you can use a digital signature. We are submitting online, you are working on screen, and you don't have to print a page and sign it and then scan it back in. It's not necessary. You can sign digitally, or you can just enter text in that space. But it is important that your declaration is complete. So your name, your surname, your student number, all the details it requires must be there together with the signature, even if it's digital. Then the third page has your table of contents. The fourth page and onwards is your content, starting with an introduction, ending with a conclusion, and then the last page or pages is the list of sources consulted. And thereafter, if you have any addenda, I don't think you'll have an addendum for assignment 1. You also have to reference the sources you use by citing them in the text, as well as providing a full reference in the list of sources consulted at the end. Specific details on the referencing style and all the other technical requirements can be found in the tutorial letter 301 and the separate documents that link to the TUT 301 under additional resources on my UNISA. There's like a separate document almost for every important aspect of the technical requirements. You can also see a lot of details on this website. I have shared it with you before. This is a website with smaller tutorials on different aspects of presenting assignments and referencing in assignments. And there's a lot of detail, step-by-step detail, where you find the different parts of a complete reference in your list of sources, how to exactly with spaces and commas and whatever in your in-text citations. So sometimes those are really worthwhile watching. 10 of your 100 assignment marks are dedicated to your technical presentation. But some of the problems that you might think are technical problems, they can cause you to receive 0 for the entire assignment, because they are not technical problems only, they are also problems that has to do with other issues of academic integrity or issues of legality. For instance, the declaration has to be there as a legality. So if you don't have that, we can't assess and you get 0. Then a list of sources, in-text references, know the correct Turnitin, and the similarity shown in the Turnitin. Those things can all cause you to get a 0 for the entire assignment. So it's not only important for technical marks. However, you will get a technical presentation mark out of 10 for assignment 1. Then regarding the content requirements. Now, in last week's tutorial, I talked about the heart of the content that we cover in this assignment, but this is more about the requirements and the criteria for assignment 1. Now, in your 101 on page 19 and 20, you will find most of the important information about what to include in each essay. Let's look at those things together, and I'll talk you through the details so that you know you cover everything you need. For each essay, You must discuss the philosophical principles of that paradigmatic position, the assumptions underlying it, the differences and diversity within that group or differences between scholars in that field or so on, and the methodological approaches associated with each position. Now, the philosophical principles, what do I mean by that? These are the basics. For you, it's something like a summary or a definition of what this paradigm or this paradigmatic position entails. Also, maybe some historical information for context, like where did it come from, how did it emerge, because of what reasons, and so on. It will also contain some indication of the theoretical traditions associated with it, and it will overlap in parts with the ontology, epistemology, axiology, and methodology associated with this paradigmatic position, but this is more of a summary of the philosophical principles than the assumptions must be unpacked in a bit more detail. Then the assumptions are those four: the ontological assumptions, epistemological assumptions, axiological assumptions, and methodological assumptions associated with each paradigmatic position. Now, paradigms are human constructions. They are like beliefs. They are almost on the same level as ideologies or religions or so on. So these are not about absolute things. They are not about rights and wrongs and is nots. That is why we call these things assumptions, because they are assumed truths or parts of this bigger belief system or worldview system. So don't get too confused with the word assumptions. It's just because we can't say that these things are assumptions, what are assumed to be true if you look at the world or at knowledge or at methods through this specific paradigmatic frame or from this specific worldview or from a specific position and so on. So that is why we call these things assumptions. Then the diversity within each grouping. What you must know first is that these groupings were decided by me and the module team. It's not the only way to group things, and there are even more complications. Like there are transformations and philosophical debates and so on. So differences between people, differences in terminology, different ways of conceptualizing things, different ways of formulating it. And that diversity is what I'm interested in. Like even the way we cluster things together, you will see that some people have other ways of clustering them together. And those little clusters we've created can even give you an idea of where to start with a discussion on diversity. For instance, the decol, postcol, indigenous, we group those things together, but we use them, keep them as separate terms because we couldn't settle on one term that is overarching for everything. So the differences between those three terms and how people conceptualize differently when they use those different terms, that could be a part of such a discussion on diversity within the grouping. Also, for instance, the transformational or the critical paradigmatic position. What are the differences between transformational and critical? That can be a good start to discussion on diversity within each group. Then we ask you to cover the methodological approaches. This is a bit easier than the rest. Your methodological approaches will overlap or at least link with your methodological assumptions, but the methodological assumptions are more the philosophical side, what you believe about methods. Where methodology and methodological approaches are the specific design process, specific research methods, data gathering, sampling tools and techniques and so on. To ensure that you have everything you need, I suggest some kind of systematic approach. Like when I write, I always try to divide the number of words between the sections I need to include. Let me show you an example. So they don't need to be perfectly equal, but it helps you to keep track in a way that you cover everything in sufficient detail without going overboard in some areas and lacking in other, and that you stick to the word count and so on. So if you plan to write, for instance, 200 or 300 words on this section, 100 to 200 words on another section. You can check yourself in the end to see that you have enough detail, or that you are writing, whether you are writing too much, or whether you have a balance between the different sections. Now for essay questions, we don't go into a criteria system where we give 5 marks for this, 2 marks for this, 1 mark for that, and so on. But if you want a rule of thumb, you can think that for 30 marks for an essay, you have to bring us something like 30 arguments or points or different bits of information. So you can't think that writing a total of 12 sentences for an essay is enough to give you 30 marks. And then you can't expect that if you write 20 points about the philosophical principles and just 1 short sentence about the diversity within the paradigmatic grouping, that there's a balance problem, then you won't get all the marks for that subsection that you have that you've kind of neglected. So look at the example on the screen. This could be a way to approach it. Like the positivist is like the example, but there's no real content in there. So you start with an introductory sentence or 2, then have a subsection for the philosophical principles, and then you discuss the basics there, and you cover the meaning, the definition, maybe some context. You try to get between 1 and 200 words in that section. Then the assumptions, that's a bit more detailed, so 300 to 400 words in this section. Remember that you must again go back to that assumptions and link it in some way when you get to subsection 1.4. Then the differences, that you have to discuss that. So something like 150 or 200 words, touching on differences in terminology, different conceptualizations, and debate maybe going on in academic circles about this paradigm, and then methodological approaches covered in the last section, and then a little concluding section that maybe gives your personal impression or summarizes like the suitability for research in a specific organizational communication context. Just a sentence to end it all off with before you start with the next essay. Right, so I think that's it from me. I covered like some of the things that you are asking me about, the basic requirements of this assignment, the technical stuff, and then also the specifics about what is the content you need to attend to for assignment 1. But please feel free to email me if you are uncertain, or if anything else comes up, or if I've forgotten to cover something today. All right, I hope you enjoy your work. Bye-bye.